Well, I think part of it is, and I agree very much with what Shashi said about the education system. It happened to be because of the dictatorship and my travels and my migration and refugee being, I went to 8 different schools in 4 different countries in 12 years. So I went to very different educational systems, and that made me think. Made me think about, that there is not one way, and made me critically think. So I think that we need to rethink of our educational systems, first of all, which are based on a somewhat industrial, military type of job, where you sit in a classroom, you learn something that's supposed to be for your whole life. As you said, we do not know what tomorrow's professions will be. So we need to give very different skills. Very different skills. That doesn't mean that you don't have a direction or maybe a specific skill, but you need a wider skill. I actually asked the head of Fiat, Agnelli, once. I was Minister of Education. He was sitting next to me in an airplane. We were coming from Davos. I said, "What would you want for employment? I'm Greek, and we have an employment too. And what kind of education would you like for your people?" He said, of course, he was Italian. He said, philosophy. They have to learn philosophy. And I said, well, why philosophy? He said, well, they open up their horizon to everything. They can think of new ways. They will critically think and so on. So can we create critically thinking
liberal arts?
Yes, but that is also linked to democracy, because if you have critically thinking citizens, if you have people that are resilient, you will have people who will criticize power, and that's very good, and they will see the wrongdoings, and they will be able to articulate this, and the vice versa. If you have democracy, and you want people to make decisions for you, what do you want? You want a well-informed and well-educated populace, because they are going to make the decisions for society. So if you said, as you say, they were illiterate, obviously India thrived and went ahead. But the more educated, the better. And that's why in ancient Greece, you had theater, you had a thriving of culture, theater, music, mathematics, games. These were all not just for fun. This was also a training of a citizen. Theater, if you read ancient Greek theater, it is mockery very often of the power. It said, okay, these powerful people, they think they're special and so on. And there was a lot of mockery, so it really was developing a sense of citizenship and a responsibility of citizens towards society. So education and democracy go together. Now, when we have an autocratic leader, they want the opposite. So the welfare is what you were mentioning, I think, that handing out something to poor, which in the end does not give them the skills to be self-sufficient. Not to be able to, so you are becoming dependent on this clientelistic role. So how do we create the type of skills and the kind of empowerment of our citizens so they do not have to be dependent on some leader to say, today I think I will give you a bonus, or today I think I may give a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I've seen that in Greece, unluckily also. And secondly, they also define identity. They don't want you to be, if an autocrat decides, and that's why we talk about identity politics. So, for example, Orban says, I will tell you what Hungarian is. It's not so much that he tells you what Hungarian is, he has the power to tell you what you should be. And any deviation from that is not being Hungarian. So can you imagine how anti-democratic that is, and how anti-critical thinking that is, and how powerful that is in a society to be able to control? Well, he should be saying, yes, being Hungarian can be a myriad of things. I mean, India, of course, is so diverse. But if you build on identity, and Amartya Sen has written a very, very beautiful piece on identity and violence, where he says we must accept this diversity, of course, with some basic values for all. Because this, in the end, is what a democratic society is. And it also is a society which can accept differences, can accept debate, can accept critical thinking, can accept actually that we can compromise and we don't have dividing lines which will end up in violence.
I mean, I agree with you that I think the whole basis of this is an educated population is a better population. So, Shashi, I know when you first came, you did, like, for example, in Kerala, just teach people English because you felt that it's probably, not probably, in India, the most educated state, but people were not getting jobs because their English wasn't good. Sometimes it could be a soft skill like that that's important. So I just want to talk a little bit about what kind of soft skills should we inculcate in our children so that they are better prepared to ask questions and not just be sitting there, accepting things thrown their way.
Well, we just have to encourage it. I'm frequently talking to schools and college teachers and saying, listen, don't just tell the kids, if they ask you why something is, that it's always been that way or that it's in the textbook. Try and explain. And if they ask you why not, however absurd the question may be, it's only by explaining why not. Why can't the sun rise one day in the west? I mean, you have to explain. And that's how they learn to think and to distinguish between what's feasible, what's not. And imagine things out of the box. I often tell the story of these. I wear glasses barely 5% of the day. And so there was a time when I would constantly lose, break, misplace my glasses. And I was complaining about it. And I said, well, for 150 years, they made glasses to sit on your nose and hang on your ears. And I find that uncomfortable, especially since I don't need them most of the time. So I don't know what to do with them. And that's why it goes wrong. So he says, I'll find you a solution. And this is what he found. This is great. Because what is this? This is very simply, it stays around my neck all day long. I forget it's there, but I don't lose it. I don't misplace it. I don't have to find a pocket or a drawer for it. And then when I need it, the 5% of the day that I need to look at a distance, I can just do this. 2 magnets in the middle, clicked in place. I can see you guys in the back. Hi, and there we are. Now, why is this new? It's simply because for 150 years, no one thought of it. Suddenly someone did. And why can't you therefore reimagine pretty much the things that you thought couldn't be reimagined? Imagine if a kid 10, 15 years ago had talked about why do we need fuel or petrol for a car? And the teacher impatiently said, I'm sorry, that's the only way a car will move. You've got to get the engine to move, the motor needs it, you have to do it. And then that kid happened to be Elon Musk and he went off and thought about a battery instead of a petrol engine. The point is that you can't and shouldn't discourage seemingly absurd questions because it's from those completely sort of unimaginable, out-of-the-box kind of ideas that innovations come.
Yeah.
I mean, in my own lifetime, the changes I've seen, George and I are just born a few years apart, and we have seen a world which gave us, for the first time, everything from computers, personal computing, the internet, mobile telephony, satellite communications, the ability to watch events in real time halfway across the globe, the ability to speak halfway across the globe for free. Look, when I went to graduate school in America, it cost me $12 a minute to call mom. I didn't have the money. I couldn't do it. Today it's free on WhatsApp, right? I mean, so you've got transformations that we couldn't have imagined when we were becoming adults.
Yeah.
And the truth now is, there will be, for today's children, the same thing. Things I can't even dream of, somebody will dream of it and find a way to make it real, and it's going to happen. So again, I would stress the importance of adaptability. You asked about us and our own experiences. I've had to adapt a lot. Yes, I adapted to making 17 speeches a day in Malayalam after never having used the language for decades while I was internationally engaged. And it was fine, because in the initial stages when my Malayalam was still inadequate, and my opponents thought that's how they could defeat me. But I said, look at this guy, he can't even speak our language properly. He's used to sitting in New York in an air-conditioned office in a 3-piece suit. How can he represent us? And I would go to them and speak to them in Malayalam, and wearing Malayali clothes for the hot season of the election campaign. And I would say, you see that my Malayalam isn't great, but it's good enough to understand your hopes and your needs. But what's more important, I have the English and the Hindi to express them in Delhi, to get things done for you. Speaking good Malayalam in Delhi won't get you very far. And that clinched the vote. I won with a record majority. Yeah. So even these things, there are ways that you can deal with them. And ultimately, effectiveness is what matters.
Yeah.
If you're going to sit there and be ineffective, no one will want you back.
I agree.
And I hope the proof of the pudding is that I came back 4 times. Yeah. I mean, I want to keep trying to do it. But
congratulations.
I know,
Bravo.
George, actually, we're talking about Even there's a certain sense of humor in dealing with that also, and a certain practicality. We should end on the story you said earlier about, this is Shashi's favorite topic also, talking to the British government about how much they stole from each of us, etc. And you were having conversations with the British government about returning some things to you guys. Can you tell us about your conversation?
The Elgin marbles, Parthenon marbles.
Yes. Well, this may have, we have this in common also. I think we have many other things too, but I know you have been fighting for the return of many of the artifacts from the colonial times here in India. And when I went to the British Parliament to vote, to promote the idea of the return of the marbles. So the Parthenon is in the middle of Athens, a beautiful building from the time of Pericles. And Elgin, Lord Elgin, came to then the Ottoman Empire, stole most of the beautiful statues on the fresco of the frieze of the Parthenon, and took them to London. And there they are for more than a century.
He also showed up in Calcutta, I'm sorry to say.
He did also. Okay, so he has a story of this colonial.
There was an Elgin Road in Calcutta when I was growing up.
Okay, so
I'm sure the Greek consul wouldn't have been happy to see that. Sorry, God.
But this is a common history in a way. And so I went to the UK Parliament to talk to the special committee on the return of artifacts, and I said we need to have the return. First of all, it's one monument, so you can't have half of the monument in Athens and the other half in London. And one of the parliamentarians said, well, you know, it's very good in London because
we look after it better.
Well, that's one of the things, and that's why we created the Acropolis Museum, which is a very beautiful museum. I welcome you to come and visit. And but another one said, well, you know, we have so many tourists in London. So many people see it, while they will not see it in Athens. And then the response was, well, maybe we should take it to Beijing, where they even have more people there. So this is, I think, something in common. But I would want to go back also to the education issue and maybe the resilience, which I believe is of great importance. Yes, we need to change our education system. Let us think of a school. We think of a school as sort of a little bit outside. It's a parallel to what's happening in our society. We need to bring societal problems into our schools. It sounds a bit controversial, but if our young students don't discuss the problems we have in our society and then be able to discuss them and discuss the conflicts and discuss the difficulties and discuss the dilemmas that we have in our societies, that is how we will make them citizens. And that, of course, does not train them only in special skills that are for professions. It is training them to be citizens of tomorrow. Can we see a school a crucible of our future society? Now, I also believe that we have ways to have a resilience through innovation. Because innovation, as you said, it has to have an open mind. But to have an open mind, you do have to have a democracy in the end. So China may be very innovative, but they are basically, I believe they are taking a lot from what they see from around the world and replicating it. But I think we can be much more innovative. And the more we are democratic, the more we are resilient, because we are allowing for new ideas, and absurd ideas, as you said, which in the end are not absurd, or some may be, and say maybe not. And we also are allowing people to take a risk. What you were saying also, I think, and that's part of the being resilient, or part of being reinventing yourself, you immerse yourself in a very new environment. So it's very different to go to a village in my constituency and speak to the farmers or the shepherds, and very different to be in the UN or in Brussels and speaking with other diplomats. Immersing yourself and taking the risk is also a way to reinvent yourself. But I would add one more thing. Let us think of designing democracy using our new tools. So we have Facebooks and we have Googles and we have Instagram, and I assume that India has its platforms too, and its influencers and all that. Why do we not create a fourth branch of government? Now, I will agree with you that not many people will want it, because some of the people don't want this power, where everybody has a vote and a say, or at least a say, and maybe we'll see a vote. And you can say that, okay, in ancient Athens, there were maybe 5, 6, 7,000 people. They could gather in an area near the Acropolis called the Pnyx, and if you had a bit of a loud voice, they would sit on a rock there a bit higher. They would speak, and everybody pretty much could hear them. Well, if you scale that up to 1 million, or to 10 million, or to 1 billion, like in India, how do you have everybody's voice? Well, if you create an e-agora, agora is where the marketplace was and the political discussion was, but an electronic one where everybody can be on the website, as I tried as an experiment when I was Prime Minister. And everybody has a unique identity. You can't have bots, you can't have 1 million voices, you have one equal voice. Each one, which is a democratic way. Today we don't have equal voices. You can have a government like Russia, for example, or maybe China, or others too, replicating a voice, and you think it's many citizens, but it's actually non-existent citizens. But if we have one equal voice, and everybody, all the laws are put there, and they are discussions, and you create the algorithms, not for hate, because the social media is creating algorithms to get your attention, to sell you something, and they find the most basic instincts, unluckily, and it looks like hate and fear or sex or whatever. So they promote that a lot, and that of course creates much more discord and lack of cohesion and a lack of community rather than real community. What if you could create an algorithm which would help the debate, bring out the differences, but also help for compromises? And you could create algorithms like this in an AI system. And in an AI system, you could have billions of people participating because that has the capacity to process this data. So let us redesign democracy using these tools which can allow for citizens' participation and, I would say, citizens' innovation in governments and governance. These are the things we need to restart thinking about.
So, Shashi, what are your thoughts on
I
it?
like the idea, provided the outcome is only advisory. Because we are still an unequal world, we are an unequal society, and there will be some voices that will drown out the others, however good your algorithm is. So I would say this fourth branch of government is an advisory branch. And it will give the rulers of the day, the legislators who after all are elected by the people, an idea of what public opinion seems to want, and then they can judge for themselves how seriously they will take it in voting for it. But I couldn't resist mentioning two other things. One was you talked about the British telling you, oh, there are more people in London, so that's why we're going to keep it here.
Yeah.
That's not an argument they can use with India.
There
are far more people in India.
We should bring it to India then.
Yeah, they should bring it to India. But the second thing, George, I don't know if you'll recall this. Lakshmi got me back in 2009-10 to address one of her conferences, and I spoke on the soft power of India. I was a minister then. And then a few months later, I mean, the damn blessed thing went viral on YouTube and so on and so forth. A few months later, there was an Indian newspaper report saying that the Greek cabinet had viewed my speech and the Prime Minister wanted, as a part of the response to the financial crisis, to actually move towards promoting Greek soft power as part of the answer. So I asked the Greek ambassador whether this was true or whether it was just some enthusiastic Indian journalist. He said, yeah, it actually happened. And it was in the Greek newspapers too. And you must have been the Prime Minister at that time.
I was the Prime Minister, so what I would do, I looked around. We had, during the financial crisis, I think not only the Greek people, but the cabinet was even in more of a crisis. Because every day we had, where are we going bankrupt? What is, who tweeted what, what the markets are doing, what are the bonds like, our interest rates. So people were very nervous, and of course, the cabinet was tasked to cut, and reform, and there's a huge burden on them. So I had to do cabinet meetings 2 or 3 times a week. I don't know, I think that no other government has had so many cabinet meetings, and it was a bit of a group therapy also. So what I would do is I would bring in TED Talks before.
It was a TED Talk, yeah.
And I would have them, it was a TED Talk, right. So I would have them listen to a TED Talk and sort of lighten the atmosphere, but also give a bit of inspiration. So Shashi here was a great inspiration for us. Thank you very much.
So the three of us
Yes.
were united all those years
Yes,
ago.
that's right,
and
that's
With
right.
the reunion after 2009. So I just want to wrap up by saying that I think this conversation can go on forever. But I think at the bottom of it, it's sort of, I don't know how many of you, sorry, no questions right now. How many of you saw Three Idiots? There's a scene where the guy goes for an interview and the person says that, "Arey yaar, we are willing to give you the job, but you have such an attitude, like, would you like to tone that a little bit?" And then he says, "Sir, after great, work, I got this attitude. So you can keep your job, but I really want to keep my attitude." And I think, one of the things you both talked about, whether it's a soft power or being able to question, is that attitude which has a combination of hope and humility and humor and fearlessness. And that's what we hope our next generation can have, because it's only in our ability to question, in our ability to have hope and keep moving forward, which is what both of you have done tremendously. You both live very public lives, and we know every dip and up in your lives like under magnifying glass. But still, you both are here giving such amazing conversation. Thank you, George, for coming all the way from Greece, and thank you, Shashi, for making, I know what a busy schedule
Thank you
have.
for reuniting me with
Yes,
George. It's
thank
been-
all
And
of
I
you. Thank you so much for all of you for being
Thank you.
with us.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. And I just want to say, Shashi is an inspiration because, when you're in politics, there's a big pressure to go for power. And if you don't get into power, you are somewhat disappointed. But I think what Shashi is showing here is that whether you are in or out of power, your voice matters and you can serve. And that is much better than just looking for power. Thank you,
Thank
Shashi.
you, George. Appreciate it.